Hello everybody, and welcome to HRC Games. In this video, I'm going to discuss what makes a good solitaire game and why you should consider playing more solitaire games. COVID-19 and the resulting isolation has provided us with a unique time to explore solitaire games. Solitaire games provide us with an opportunity to continue gaming under trying circumstances. Perhaps our gaming groups can't get together like they once used to. Perhaps we're a little bit afraid to go outside as much as we used to and get into close quarters with people. That's okay and that's understandable. But we can use this time to maybe explore a little bit of an underappreciated genre known as a solitaire game. What I hope that you discover is that solitaire games are a great part of the overall gaming hobby. Whether it's because that you have a tight schedule, maybe because your gaming groups can no longer get together because of the pandemic, or maybe it's just that you live in an isolated area without a lot of gamers. Solitaire gaming is a great way for you to still game. I will be covering why you should be playing more solitaire games, what makes for a great solitaire game, and what we're going to do in the next couple of videos in relation to solitaire games. So why should we play more solo games? What's their value? What do they do for us as gamers? Well, first and foremost, one of the biggest problems we have as gamers, or at least gamers who play the game for a hobby, right? So not necessarily like checker players or chess players or whatever. Those games are everywhere. It's not hard to find an opponent. It's not hard to find someone to play. You don't have to convince someone that you're not doing something weird, right? So sometimes if you are gaming for a hobby, it's a little bit more difficult because you don't have an opponent always. It's hard to find people who have similar interests, especially if you're living in a smaller town. I live in a town of about 3,000 people. I'm lucky in that I do have a friend who plays my favorite game, which is Advanced Squad Leader, and so we can play together quite often, so it's not that big of a challenge. But other games can be quite challenging to find people to play with. Solitaire is a way to keep your hobby going without having to find an opponent all the time, right? So when you're in a lull, right, when your schedules don't match up, it's an easy way for you to keep gaming, right, keep your hobby alive without necessarily having to find an opponent, which is really good. Another great aspect of solitaire gaming is that you can play for any length of time and at any time, right? So if you've only got a spare 30 minutes, but you've got a dedicated space and your game is set up, you can pop down to the basement or pop down to your spare room or pop into your dining room and play for 30 minutes and then get up and go and you got something to do. If you want to play for 8 hours, you can play for 8 hours, right? You don't have to wait for anybody else. You don't have to wait on anybody else's schedule. You can just start playing and stop playing whenever it is that you want to do. Another great thing about solitaire games, it's great for relaxation. If you've had a long day at work or maybe you're a little stressed out about something, it's easy for you to go down, in my case, to this room, which is the basement, and kind of shut the door and just play your game for a while, right? No one's going to bother you. Nothing's going on. There's no external distractions. It's a good way to decompress, right? So it's a great way to relax. It's also a great way to kind of pass the time in a way that's not stressful. So like for me, during the summer, one of the best ways for me to pass time is to break out a solitaire game that I've thought would be great to play. Maybe it's going to take a few weeks to play the whole game because I don't always have a lot of time to play that game. I can leave it set up and then I can come down to the basement, take a break from whatever else it is I'm doing. I like to turn on the baseball game in the background, so I'll have my game set up literally right where I'm sitting, and I have a TV that's right there, and I can turn the volume on low, keep track of the baseball game, and play a solitaire game. Great way to relax. Also, being from Wisconsin, we tend to get a lot of snow, and sometimes it gets pretty darn cold, so it's also a great way to spend an afternoon when it's snowing, right? So maybe if you can't get people to come over because the weather's crappy, or you can't get everyone's schedules together, you can be like, all right, well, I do have an afternoon a game, so I will sit down with a solitaire game and pass some time and kind of enjoy the day that way. Another great advantage of the solitaire game is the rules. Sometimes when you're playing with other people, you may have disagreements about rules. You maybe feel like, all right, it's hard for me to digest all the rules because I've got to dedicate all this time to playing because I don't have that much time to play with someone when they're around, right? So we don't want to mess with rules. We just want to kind of plow through the game and get things going. And sometimes you get hung up on a rule, especially if it's a fairly complicated game, and it can kind of drag your game down. The great thing about solitaire games is you don't have to worry if you get the rules wrong, right? No big deal because you're playing against yourself, right? So if it's wrong, it's wrong. You can move on. Or if you're the type of person who wants to make sure you get every rule right, then you're not putting anyone else out by kind of putting your game on pause, getting the rule book out, and then looking through the rules and finding what it is that you need to do to make sure that you're doing it right. So There's no arguments about rules. There's no pressure about getting rules right. And there's no pressure that you're feeling like you're wasting someone's time if you are constantly going back and looking at the rules, which is, to each their own, right? I'm not a huge, got to play by the rules every step of the way. Not that important to me. I want to get the game generally right. I want to have fun. I want it to have a good pace. There are other people that I know who just love to, meticulously go through the rules, and that's a great way to play too. I don't have any problem with that either. But sometimes if you are in a time crunch, you've only got 2 hours to play with your friend, and you only get together once a week, you don't want to spend half an hour messing with the rules, right? Because it can really kind of crimp into your playing time. But if you've got a good solitaire game, you don't have to worry about that. You can play at your own pace. You can pay as much attention to the rules as you want, or as little attention to the rules as you want. Either way, that always works. Finally, one of the best aspects of solitaire game is that, generally speaking, they fit in a box. One box. So you can take your game with you, which is great. If you're going on vacation and you're going to have some downtime, you can take your game with you. Maybe if you're going camping, you can take your game with you and play at night by the fire if you want. I know that there are lots of people who take their games if they're going on business. So you travel a lot for business, looking for something to do at night besides maybe going and sitting in the bar all night, then you can take your game with you, set it up in a hotel room. When you get back from doing whatever it is you do on your business trip, then you can relax by playing your favorite solitaire game. Again, you may have to make some choices of whether or not you're bringing all the expansion packs, so forth and so on, but by and large, most of these games, at least the core modules, will fit in one box. You put it in your suitcase, take it with you and play. I think that's a really great thing to do. The next most important thing to talk about is what makes a good solo game, right? Not all solo games are good. Obviously, not all games are good, right? So you're going to have to decide what are the kinds of things that you value when you're picking out a solo game and when you play a solo game. I have a couple standards that I like to use. It's by no means, the world's best set of rules or whatever. It's just kind of a guideline that I like to evaluate my games by. First and foremost, and this probably isn't explicit to a solitaire game, is I need clear rules, right? They need to be well written. They need to be well organized. They need to be something that I can follow along fairly easy with, and then also reference easily in the future. So sometimes a really good index is great to help. Also, I think that it's really important for a rule set to have good examples, right? Because sometimes when you can write the rules out and everything makes perfect sense to the person writing the rules, right? But sometimes an example, a gameplay example, really helps connect those dots to the rules as they're written, right? So for me, at least, a good example is always a great way to go about making a good rule book, right? So if I can find the rules online and look at them, it kind of helps me figure out, all right, is this a rule system that I'm going to be able to kind of connect with? Do they have good examples so that if I have questions, can I get them answered by the example? Kind of ancillary to that is I'll also look before I buy a game too. Is there tutorial videos available? Are other people talking about the game? Are there walkthroughs available? If the answers are yes, then oftentimes that'll help sway me to buy a game too, because then I know that there's external help there that if I need it, I can get it, right? Because if you're playing with someone in a multiplayer game, you can bounce ideas off each other and kind of work your way through some things, right? But if you're playing a solo game, it's helpful if there's a robust online community that can help you with those things as well. So that's an important thing to keep in mind. Not necessary, right? I think the rule set's much more important than that, because I've also found sometimes when you watch online tutorials that sometimes they're wrong too, right? And that's all right too. That's not a big deal. Again, I'm not a rules like it's got to be perfect. But I think that it is important that you do have that help if you need it. Just as important, or maybe even more important, is the bot or the AI. You want a system that is going to run itself fairly well, that's going to be challenging, but not so challenging that you never win, but not so easy that you always win. I kind of like to play a game where the first few times I probably end up losing. That's a good bot to me. But as I get more experienced, I win more consistently. Not all the time. I still like to lose because that means I'm being challenged. So you want the game to be difficult and good, but not impossible and not too easy. You want to find that sweet spot. And that's different for everybody, right? Some games click intuitively with what it is that you do, so it's easy for you to win, right? And that may not be the bot's fault, right? But there are some games out there to where if you're playing, the first 3 games and you win all 3 of those games, there may be something that's not quite right about that AI or the bot for that game. Another thing that's important to me is it can't be random. The decisions that I make throughout the game should play a role in how the game plays out. It can't just be roll a bunch of dice, look it up on a chart, and that's how the game goes. Right? Now, a lot of solitaire games do have a lot of charts, and they do have a lot of dice, and that's by necessity. That's how they run. But they should accentuate your decisions, right? They should make your decisions make more sense. They should follow a logical path. It shouldn't be completely random. The decisions that I make, like what weapons I take on a certain tank, or how much torpedoes do I load in the U-boat before I go out on a patrol, or what kinds of resources I decide to develop if I'm making a colony, should all play an integral role into how that game plays out, right? So we want to make sure, or I like to make sure, that the game is not totally random. On the flip side of that, I do like a little bit of randomness. I think that adds to the replayability of the game. I think that means that there's some surprise and some suspense to the game, right? Because part of the appeal of playing with another person is you never know exactly what it is they're going to do. So there is some randomness to other games too, because maybe they conceptualize the strategy in a different way than you do. Maybe they conceptualize the victory conditions in a different way that you do. Random dice can help with that as well, because it kind of shows that maybe this artificial intelligence, or the bot, doesn't always behave the way that you think that it should. That's okay, right? Because your opponents, when you play multiplayer games, don't either. So it's all right for them to be a little bit random. You just don't want the randomness to control the entire game. Also, very important in my mind is that the game needs to be replayable. I don't want to purchase a game, and let's face it, some of these games are pretty expensive. You can spend anywhere from $50 to $150 on a game or a module. And I want to be able to play that game more than once. I want it to be more of a hobby style game, right? So where you're playing solitaire with a deck of cards, you're just flipping out the cards, and then you put the cards away and you go away. Right? That's not really a hobby game. What I tend to focus on most of my games are the kind of the hobby games. So I want my game to have lots of replayability. I want to be able to get my money's worth out of that game. And a lot of times people will say, well, those games are way expensive. If that's $80 for a game, that's a ton of money for a game. And the way I like to look at it is, well, it is a game, but it's also more of a hobby, right? It's something that I do. It's something that I use to pass the time. It's something that I use to keep my mind engaged. So it's really not that expensive if you think about it in that way. You go play golf 2 times and you're up to $50, $80 depending upon where you live and depending on what kind of courses you have available. And you play that golf that 1 or 2 times and your money's gone, right? But if I play my solitaire game 5 times and I think about it like a golf game, because it may take the same amount of time, I'm getting a lot of mileage out of that money, right? And then I can put it on the shelf and leave it there for a year, come back to it in a year and be like, oh, this game was great. And then I can play it for, 5 or 6 more times. So replayability is huge because it helps me get mileage out of my money. I think that if you find a game that has lots of variations, sometimes that can be because there's different missions, there can be different campaign games, sometimes they come out with expansions. All those things are great and really add up to the game being replayable. So I think that's very important as well. As a bonus, if you can find a game that is also a multiplayer game, that's even better, because now you're getting 2 games for the price of 1. Here's the thing though. You want to make sure when you're getting these games that can be both multiplayer games and solitaire games, that the solitaire portion of the game has not been an afterthought. Right? Sometimes I get the impression when I play some of these games that the rule set for solitaire was done at the end of the creation process as an add-on, as a way to get more customers, and it's not fully developed. It's not really part of the game. And usually that you'll see that because the games will be way too random. The rules won't be well written. There's no good examples for that solitaire game. So kind of be on the lookout. So if you can, again, look at those things online, the rule books, and you can kind of get an idea of what the solitaire game is, you'll know this is a good, solid game for solitaire play. A good example of this kind of combination of both of these ideas together is Space Corp. And we'll probably take a look at that in a few weeks in a future episode. But it's a really good balance of, hey, this game can be played with multiplayer and this game can be played solitaire. Both games are well designed and they've both been given an equal treatment, right? So when you buy that game, you're actually getting 2 games for the price of 1, which makes that an excellent game for you to play. Moving forward, I'm going to spend the next couple episodes featuring a few solitaire games. So each episode will have, hey, let's look at this solitaire game. Then the next one will be, let's look at this different solitaire game. I'm going to do some new games that have just come out, and I'm going to do some old games, some old classics as well. A note about the way I do reviews, they're not really reviews, they're more explorations. I'm going to show you what's in the box. I'm going to show you the rule sets, kind of walk through what the game is about, what's historical kind of context, those types of things. I'm not going to spend a lot of time, giving it 4 stars or 5 stars or 3 stars, right? Because that's all just kind of subjective opinions. So what clicks for one person doesn't click for another person. So my goal is to not criticize games per se, or to convince you to buy them or not buy them. Generally speaking, if I'm going to spend the time talking about a game, it's a game that I like, it's a game that I respect, and it's a game that I've enjoyed. So take that for what it's worth. I'm not in the business of putting someone's hard work down. That's not what I'm going to do. So you will notice that when I talk about games, it's generally going to be positive about those games. So I'm going to tell you what I like about them. I'll also tell you if they have some shortcomings. But again, that's not a criticism per se. It's just my interaction with that particular game. So next time we're going to take a look at some solitaire games, and we'll hopefully get you kind of motivated to play some of those games. So like and subscribe below. Don't forget to click on the alerts so that you know when the next episode is posted. Thanks for watching, and play more games, and we'll see you next time.